avoid the background noise during the presentation. I'd like to ask everyone to please keep their devices set to mute. And if you have any questions, please type them into the chat function on your Google Meet screen, which is the icon at the top right-hand corner, the icon that looks like a little speech bubble. So hover over that, should confirm that when it comes up to help. But if you hover over that and just type in the chat with everyone and go for it. Our moderator tonight, community member Adrian Weir, will pose your questions as we go along at the end, and we'll have some time at the end of the talk too. So feel free to add your questions. Tonight's guest speaker, we're excited to have Melbourne-based photographer Mark Forbes. And Mark is best known for his atmospheric documentary photography of street scenes, urban landscapes and structures, predominantly using medium format or traditional film cameras. Mark's work's been exhibited in a heap of exhibitions and has collected many awards for his work over the last 10 plus years. His work's also held in the Victorian Archives, Public Records Office, Vic, and other private collections. So tonight, Mark's going to talk to us about how film has changed his approach to photography. So I'm looking forward to this. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Mark. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks very much, Russell. And yeah, thanks for having me on board, AASPI, and all of the people who've joined in to listen. I've got a few slides to go through, and yeah, I'll just kick it off now, and we can go from there. I'm going to lose the video, but I'll still be here, and if you have any questions, sing out. Cheers. Okay, cool. Yeah, so as was just said, I'm going to be talking specifically about how film changed my approach to photography. As I was mentioning to the committee members just before, I do have some pretty old photos in here that I've dredged back that haven't been seen by anyone before. So that's it's interesting for me to have a look through my work in the past few days. So yeah, in terms of the talk overview, I'll just give a very quick overview, a little bit about me, and from there, it's pretty much going to be in reasonably sort of chronological order in terms of the photos that I show you. I'll talk a bit about my early street photography, and then about a third of the way through the pictures, we'll go into how I got back into shooting film, and then how I've been using different formats to sort of refine where I am at the moment, and how I enjoy shooting, and also how as film has affected my approach to shooting in terms of slowing down, etc. And then we can do some Q&A at the end. So yeah, a little bit about me. So I'm a self-taught photographer. I don't have any formal classes or any training. I do some client work, things like architecture, portraits, and some weddings occasionally, that sort of stuff. The way that I taught myself was very much trial and error, a bit of trial and a lot of error. And I did do a lot of reading, and just basically practice. So that's often a question I get asked from a lot of people is, have you been to uni? Have you done this and that? No, it's all just been stuff that I've tried to teach myself or been interested in. In terms of significant steps that I've found along my photography journey, the first one was really when I decided one day to switch my camera from the green square auto mode to manual mode, and that probably taught me a lot of things. And then the second thing was really one day many years ago when I had some surgery, and I was lying in bed, and I had sort of 6 weeks where I had nothing to do, didn't have a TV in my room, etc. And I just decided to myself one day, and this was pretty much when I decided to sort of take the camera off the green square, was just read the manual back to front and go, oh, that's how you do this, that's how you do that. So it was really trial and error from that point of view, reading the manual and then just reading web forums and going from there. The second real step for me was when I transitioned to shooting film, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And just the two images that you've got in front of you on the screen. The first one on the left was an image that my dad took of a sailing boat that he was sailing behind on Sydney Harbour, and that was really my first memory of a child of photography. And yeah, that was really my connection to photography, and the first thing that I remembered up on the wall for forever. And the one on the right was a 4x5 tintype shot of me that was taken on an 8x10 camera by one of my friends and photographers, Brent Coghill. And funnily enough, it's one of the very few photos of me that I enjoy. I really don't like being in front of the camera, as I can probably expect many photographers are the same. Okay, into the photo. So this photo here on the left was, in front of you, was really the first street photo that I took, where I was really sort of pleased with the result, and I thought there was something interesting in it. And I remember sort of standing back from the girl and looking across at her for maybe a minute or two. And she was aware that I had my camera out there. It's not like I was hiding it. But the moment that I went to take the picture, she sort of made eye contact with me just then, and she looked up and away to her right. And so there was something about the composition and whatnot. When I took it back off the screen, I looked at it, I thought, oh yeah, there's something more interesting there than anything that I'd done up until that point. So that was really when I was like, oh yeah, I was really getting enjoyment from, you know, to the shot, and that felt like there was some sort of progression there. This photo here, I was always really interested in rallies and riots and going anywhere where there was a lot of conflict and that sort of thing. And I remember one day there was a Antifa rally going on in the centre of Melbourne, and I thought, oh yeah, I'll go in there and see what's going on. And there was lots of press photographers around, and there was capsicum spray going everywhere. And to get this shot, I'd actually stood on top of a bin that was giving me a higher elevation. And I was essentially islanded up there. Like I couldn't sort of get up or down because there was people going around everywhere. So I stayed up there for a while, and then all of a sudden this scene unfolded in front of me, which yeah, it was pretty hairy, but definitely an interesting thing. It's not something that I would generally say street photography. It's obviously documentary photography, but to me it was just an interesting shot too. So when I think about my early street photography, I really thought that street photography had to be in black and white. And I'm not suggesting that this is an amazing photo by any means, but it's an early photo where I was using a typical technique of sort of juxtaposing someone against a backdrop, and it's something that you see people do often very commonly. And to me, it wouldn't have worked in color. And what I would tend to do is I would always go out and shoot in black and white. This is on a digital X100 initially, and then I would come home and I would think, right, the only thing I can do with these to make them into street photos is turn them into black and white. So that's what I would do. So this next one here is sort of leading on from that previous shot, and the same with the next photo too. You'll see that it's just really, I was just trying to appreciate light and shadows and waiting for the right person to walk into a scene and that sort of thing. And I guess the importance of light and harsh light too, which I know is obviously something that looking through street photographers is something that some photographers really sort of specialize in and use it as a bit of a calling card. But I've found the more that I've shot, I've sort of shied away from bright light. And I think that's more to do with how I've changed my approach to documentary photography as I've sort of progressed. But yeah, this was really something that I was looking for early on. And as you can see in this next photo, same scene, black and white, probably the same day. So I would tend to go and shoot in a certain area of town, maybe for an hour or half an hour, and I'd shoot and shoot until I really felt like I'd got the shot. And that's not really a pattern that I tend to follow these days. I tend to really generally only take a handful of photos, maybe even one or two in a scene, and then I'll move on. And another thing that you'll see here is obviously the use of very heavy contrast too, which is something that I was doing initially when I was doing some early street photography. Again, more heavy contrast here, and I obviously found something interesting in the girl's face and the fact that she's got the peacock feather in her hand, and then in the left you've got that little black and white eye going on in the bag. I'm shooting again with the X100, so I'm pretty close, which was something that I was quite comfortable for quite quickly. And I know it's not something that people enjoy doing a lot, and it's not something that I really do anymore, but it was definitely something that I was following at the time. And just trying to get interesting scenes, and obviously you've got the shadow going on in the background. So I sort of stayed in this area for maybe 5-10 minutes, and as you can see in this next photo, another shot from the same area, and again this time probably the hunchback shadow in the background is more the focal point, and the isolation of the guy on his own, and again changing it to black and white for me was what I wanted to do at the time, so that's where I was going with it. The next shot here was just a case more of realizing that the scenes that I would go past every day, and all of a sudden I would become awake to them as I started shooting more and more. And this is in Parliament Station in Melbourne. So as coming up the stairs there, I looked around one day when I was coming off the train, which is something that I would do every day. And I looked around like, oh yeah, that's a pretty interesting scene there. So I probably spent again 5-10 minutes there shooting until I felt like I'd really got the shot. I took maybe 10 or 20 shots, and I'm like, yep, that's there's something interesting going on there. Again, looking at this photo in color, to me, that it wasn't interesting and it wasn't as impactful, because the girl was popping out. There was color. You lost the impact of the shadows in the background. So I felt, being traditional and changing to black and white was something that was more interesting at the time. I used to work pretty hard on getting close to people and seeing how comfortable I could be in their space and how comfortable they were to have me in their space. And I would never sort of hide the fact that I was shooting. I'd never sort of, hide the camera in my bag and all of a sudden pull it out. I was always trying to be just, figure out how comfortable people would be. I was never sort of sneaking around. It was more just the fact, I guess, that if people thought that I had a camera and it was okay, then it was just a comfortable scenario for me to be in. Aside from the obvious fact that for those of you that aren't Victorians, that you technically can't actually use a camera on public transport or in the stations, which I find quite ironic given the fact that obviously everyone has a camera phone and uses it all the time. But transport in general is something that you'll see in quite a few of my photos. Tilt shift. So this shot was shot with the tilt shift lens, a 45mm tilt shift lens. And it was something that I was doing a lot, probably for around 6 months, pretty consistently. It was pretty much all I was shooting, which I'm not sure. It was just something that I thought was interesting. And it was more, I guess, from an aesthetic point of view than anything else. And again, here you can see I've obviously converted to black and white, and because in color, the far background was really very distracting. So again, because I was focusing on the girls and I guess the feet, it was really about trying to keep that as the focus of the image. And obviously that's where I've shifted the focus down to at the bottom of the screen. Again, here more tilt shift and more heavy contrast and more black and white. Yeah, just I guess showing you another example of the sort of things I was doing. I hadn't seen a lot of people use this in street photography, so I felt like, I was doing something that was maybe a bit different. But I did get over it reasonably quickly, and after I started shooting some more, again with the X100, I became more interested in, I guess, maybe more classic compositions. Here, obviously, you've got, and I kept this in color because to me that the color was quite complementary. There wasn't too much standing out that distracted from the story or the shot that I was trying to get. And then you got the negative space going on, and it's funny how you'll see a lot of the traits in my photos, especially more in the more recent work, is I'm very particular and borderline OCD about how making sure everything's lined up, is very straight, and it's something that's is a feature, I guess, of how I tend to shoot. This shot was taken on the train in Denmark, and it was a friend in the bottom right-hand corner, and I was sort of taking a few photos of him, and then the girl arrived in the hallway of the train in the back. I had pre-focused on him with the aim of using her as a bit of a background, and I don't know, I didn't take one with her focused to determine which was more interesting, but this is just the way that it came out. And I guess it comes, and the questions sort of come down to people ask things about, where's street photography? What constitutes a street? Is it on the beach? Is it in a train? Is it inside? And these are all things that are interesting to discuss too, I guess. Again, I used to enjoy doing a lot of night photography. This is really the first night shot I've had shared. And I enjoy going back to scenes day versus night to see the difference, because you can get obviously a significantly different outlook, shadows, lights, etc. And one other thing that I thought was very interesting about this too is it is a very busy composition. There's lots of things going on. The background's busy. And it's just interesting for me to think of how I would approach a scene like this now versus how I did 7, 8 years ago. And then really here, the reason I'm sort of showing this not super interesting shot, but it's more the fact that my eyes were being more awakened to the importance of color and how it can impact the viewer's experience in a shot, and also the importance of a clean background. So as I sort of started talking about in the previous slide, I did, as I talked at the start, I have done some wedding photography and I still do it. And I remember when I was just learning it, the first wedding I sort of shot with someone, the girl, so I sent her the photos and she said to me, I can't use some of these photos. And I said, oh, well, what's the problem? She said, well, look at your background. It's messy. You've got, an arm coming out here, a tree coming out there. And I really took that on board and adopted it in how I shoot. Just from a personal point of view, it was really composing initially with the background and then the foreground off that. So what are you taking? Where's it going to be? And how's that going to be able to stand out in your image? And that was something that's really stayed with me since. So Tokyo, again, so I haven't showed these photos with anyone before. They're not that they're super, super interesting, but they're just things that they just sat on my hard drive. So I took these in 2016. I'd gone to Tokyo to shoot a story about the 5-year anniversary of the earthquake, the tsunami and the nuclear meltdown. And I had a week in Tokyo before I went to Fukushima to actually shoot that story. And just before I went to Tokyo, I'd been thinking a lot about film as I was pretty bored with what I was shooting. And I thought maybe there was something different or challenging in film that I could get onto. So I ended up picking up a Leica M6. So on that trip, I took with me the X100, a 5D Canon to shoot the Fukushima story and the M6. And I only had 7 rolls of film because I wasn't very confident at that time. So I ended up shooting the vast majority of everything on digital. So what I'll show here is the transition, I guess, from the film to the digital in that sort of time frame.
So when you went across for Fukushima, was it on a commission or you just went there on yourself to shoot that?
No, that was, I actually did that all myself. So I arranged a translator and I arranged who we were going to talk to. I arranged a map of where we wanted to go. I started hitting up, I shot the job for an agency, but it didn't actually end up getting taken by one of the papers. But I did fund everything off my own bat initially, yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, cheers. So this shot here is Yakitori Alley in Tokyo, and I'm guessing it would have been around ISO 3200 or 4000. So yeah, for me, it's a nice mood, but it feels a bit sterile. I guess that's where I'm sort of going with. I was a little bit over what I was shooting, and I wanted to try something else. So again, I mentioned transport before, obviously being very important for me, and I could sort of ride on the trains for hours and hours and shooting stations and shoot around the trains. And you'll see more of that a little bit later in the New York series that I share. Obviously, interesting this photo for me was the arrow and the woman. Pretty simple cue, not an overly complex photo, but yeah, that's obviously what I was doing at that time. Again, here, black and white shot, high contrast. So this light was interesting to me, and I probably shot in this station for maybe 5 minutes to get the shot that I thought was interesting, and it was really obviously the woman in the sunbeam as she was looking towards the camera. So this is Harajuku, colors that I was interested in. And the thing that I really enjoyed about photographing in Japan was that generally I found that no one cared about your camera, and obviously the thing is there was tourists anywhere. It was easy to blend in and do that sort of thing, and it was one of the most enjoyable places I've ever been to shoot in. So yeah, anyone who hasn't been there once the world eventually opens up, highly recommend it. Again, some moments on the train here, could be any given station, but yeah, just something that I found somewhat interesting. And this is something that's very typical in Japan, but is very unique to a non-Japanese person. And for me, it was really refreshing to see them go about, their daily life with their traditional kimonos on, as if there was nothing special about it. When to an outsider, it was definitely really interesting. The photo to me was a little bit challenging. I don't generally enjoy sort of shooting close to people in confined spaces, because if someone gets upset, there's no way for you to sort of I guess alleviate the situation by just walking away. And I rarely take any photos like this anymore, but obviously this is what I was doing at the time. Yep, a bit of panning here, interesting colors. To me, it feels almost a bit fake or CGI a little bit in terms of how it looks, but obviously the panning speed and the shutter speed and the camera and everything lined up well. So it's just something that I thought it just has a bit of an interesting feel to it. Again, more train stations, and again, to me, it's not a revolutionary shot, but again, I basically shoot for myself, and so if I enjoy a scene or whatever, I'll shoot until and I won't avoid taking the shot just because I've seen other people do it before. But yeah, it's just something that I enjoy doing. One thing that was good, so this was February, and obviously in Tokyo you've got really strong light coming between the buildings, so combined with the time of day, you've got really nice slices of light between these huge skyscrapers, and obviously lots of different colours going on. Again, an example of getting closer to someone, but this was outside, and I feel in situations like this, to me, you really only have the opportunity to take one photo. Because once you've taken the photo, you've had your opportunity within that person's space, and yeah, so I wouldn't ever try and take multiple shots in a close proximity of someone if they weren't comfortable. But again, I think there's an interesting feeling on the woman's face, and I guess the way the hands were clasped and the light that was going on in the afternoon. So that was why I took the photo. Obviously, decisive moment style photography was what I was after here. And this was pretty lucky, and I guess this is the sort of luck that we all hope for as street photographers. So I don't think I took too many photos here, maybe 5 or 10, maybe for a few minutes, but yeah, just, I guess, yeah, combination of luck and timing. This one here I'm just showing you because I thought there was something interesting going on with the body positions of the three people. Especially the man in the distance, he feels to me as if he's got a bit of an interesting attitude going on to him, and also the scale of him versus the two guys in the front. So yeah, just that's why I guess I thought that was more interesting. First look in this photo, there's not really anything going on, but then you see the girl in the back right hand corner, and then after you've seen her, for me, you just keep going back to her. I was probably standing here maybe 5 minutes, and I'm not sure how long she was there, but yeah, I only really think I realised this shot afterwards. But yeah, something interesting in her eye. Again, more Tokyo light. So generally, what I would do before I went to Tokyo is I'd map out, a day's worth of shooting, all the different locations around town I wanted to go to, and then I'd be basically walking or on trains for about 8 to 10 hours and looking around and shooting, which was amazing to be able to do that for 5 days. And once I'd get to an area, I didn't necessarily follow any plan. It was just, this is the station, have a look around. So I'd walk around for an hour or two, or however long I felt was interesting. And to me, that really is the joy of street photography, because you never know what you're going to get. So whether you've got a loose plan or a rough plan, things can sort of, go with your nose and go with your gut. So yeah, just really fun to be able to head out and have that experience. I missed the exposure here, but I think it's more interesting than it would have been if I'd have got the exposure. And I know you're probably all aware of that shot of Trent Park's shot of the old man in the building, and I'm not making any comparisons at all between that image and this image, but for me, I guess the point there is sometimes the correct exposure isn't the one that gives the most interesting result. Yeah, and again, black and white, heavy contrast, etc. So all of the shots, everything up to this point was digital, and all of the shots going forward are film. I guess the important headline in terms of why do I enjoy shooting film, I guess it's that you can't see what you've shot, and therefore you naturally become more deliberate in how you shoot. It keeps you in the moment because you're focusing on what you're shooting rather than looking on the back of the camera. It costs you money, which may be a negative, but it means that you shoot less, which to me is actually a good thing. I found the less that I shoot, the more I enjoy it. And obviously, because you're shooting film, you might not get your shots back for days or weeks or even months. So I find it really like Christmas when I'm opening the shots when I get them back. One of the most important benefits to me of shooting film is that it has limitations. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But if you can only shoot at 400 ISO, you have no option of upping it to 32 or 4000, and it makes you really work within the limitations that you've got to become more creative. The colours in film, which we'll get into a little bit more, and obviously the old cameras are amazing and beautiful and get results that, for me, you can't get anywhere else. You end up keeping your mistakes. You don't actually delete them. They're accidents that you end up wanting to keep. So I also tend to do virtually zero editing, or as little as possible editing to my photos. So it's trying to get it right in camera and appreciating what you get on the film and the colors than sort of trying to do too much in post. And lastly, it's the challenge of it. It becomes a lot more interesting to go out and feel like you've accomplished something. So they're really the main reasons that I shoot film, but we can go into a little bit more as I work through these slides. So this was shot at ISO 400. Obviously, there's a lot of grain. I'm shooting handheld at night. There's no tripod there. And it has a bit of a different feel to the earlier shots, as you can see. This one here, again, you got some camera blur going on. You've got the overblown lights. And as I said before, you have to work within the limitations of the film that you've got. So I've got 400 speed film in there. I'm probably shooting at an 1/8 or a 15th of a second. If I was shooting on digital, I probably would have dialed the ISO up to 3200 or 4000 so I could get, 1 on 60 or 1 on 125 or even quicker. And the image would have felt completely different. And not saying that that's a bad thing, but for me, it was refreshing to get a shot that I would never have comprehended if I'd have, had a digital camera in my hand. So it was like experimenting and just trying out different things. Exactly the same here. So I think this is 1 1/4 or 1 1/8 or something like that. Trying to pan with the car to get the lights. Again, just more experimentation that I didn't see for 3 or 4 weeks after I came back, and was very, very different to the digital shots that I was getting. And this was probably a mistake, and if it had been on the back of my camera, I might have deleted it. But after a while, sort of grew on me a bit, and it's had the same sort of feeling as the past few shots that I've shared. Yeah, very different to any other street photography that I would have been shooting at the time. And I guess one other benefit that I didn't mention before is that the film that we can shoot now is obviously the same and I'm probably not telling new things to any of you. I know you've probably all shot film, but it's more that the guys back in 20, 30, 40 years ago, we can use the same film that they were using back then to an extent if it's still around, Tri-X or T-Max in this case. And again, no editing what comes out of your camera, and you don't have the option of going, do I think it was better in color? Do I think it was better in black and white? So that was it for me for that. Here I've just got the interesting pattern obviously going on. I think I probably waited maybe 5 or 10 minutes. This was a really busy lobby, and this guy was standing there for ages, just literally standing there, and people were flowing past left and right. But I knew that I wanted him to be isolated on his own to sort of get the most out of the shot. So it was a question of a bit of patience and waiting for it. I think I shot 2 rolls of color when I was over there. And initially when I came back, the only shots that I was interested in were black and white, which was going back on the sort of theme of what I was talking about before about color, traditional film photography in street being black and white being the real stuff. So I sort of shuffled away the colorful shots and didn't take any interest in it. Yeah, I guess I'm much more comfortable, having spoken before about taking photos in a confined space, of taking a shot like this in an overseas country like Japan than I would have been in Australia. And again, not shots that I take anymore, but to me it was something interesting in her expression, and just the way she was so peaceful on such a noisy train. So I'm just going to take you through. So those shots I took you through were about 2 weeks. And they were pretty much the first 2 weeks I had the camera. So when I came home, it was really for me a case of learning how to work with the limitations of 35mm film. And yeah, that's the sort of one I'm going to hop into now with a few other photos. Again, here, close proximity. I was watching the girl. She was very deep in thought, and I was just trying to figure how close could I get to her without, spooking her, and how, where's the interesting composition, and how can I get her thoughts and feelings in the image, and still keep her as the focus. And this is I think this was taken on a 35mm lens as well, so it's pretty close. But she was happy with me to be there, happy for me to stand there for a few minutes. So I was comfortable to take the photo. This shot is interesting. I think it was pretty close to the original exposure. And obviously the eyes are the point of interest, and the old man with his cane, which was pretty amazing. I think this is from a bookshop in Melbourne, these bags. So it was just a bit of luck that they happened to be in the right spot at the right time. So, yeah. This is high-speed film, 3200 ISO at handheld at night. And you can see that pretty obvious grain going on in the background there. And this couple, I think that's actually a guy with his jacket to me with the leopard skin going on. And yeah, they were just doing their thing in the street up near Pellegrini's up in Melbourne. So just some night photography, which was cool. Hats is something that, and I know street photographers tend to have something that they maybe take a pattern out of or always look for when they're out shooting. So for me, if I'm doing people street photography, which is actually quite rare these days, it's something that has the point of interest in it, and hats is something that which is definitely cool. And I cannot remember where this photo was taken, but yeah, just the light must have been working well with the background, wherever that was, to have such a clean background in there. So a bit of color again. Generally, I'm shooting 400 speed, very cheap consumer film. And as I started to shoot a little bit more color after coming back from Japan, I shot a lot less black and white. And these days, I pretty much only shoot in color. And the funny reason was when I got the X100, one of the reasons I bought it was actually because of its film simulation modes. And now that I'm getting color scans back, I don't feel there's any need to do anything with the colors. It's pretty much straight out of camera is good. So I really started shooting more for color itself and how it was being rendered, and how it was interpreting the scene and making the scene up in the background. So this was shot at 17 mil. Which is obviously very, very close. And these tourists had gotten off a bus. They walked up the street. They all took a photo of the building, and then they all got back on the bus. So it was quite comical to watch, and I was pretty lucky to be able to get so close to them and just take off one shot, I think, or maybe even two.
So, Mark, I've got a question here from Kylie. And so Kylie asks, were these first film shots all taken with the M6, or did you have another film camera as a backup?
Yeah, so what you're seeing here is predominantly M6, a little bit of an SLR, which is a Canon Rebel film camera, and also there's a Olympus XA and a Rolly 35 SE, which I actually have here. They're all on the shelf here, but I'll just show you this just because that's a very interesting point. So this is the 35 SE, and as you can see, it's literally tiny. I mean, it's the size of my palm. And as far as I understand, it was the smallest 35mm film camera they ever made. And it literally is like a spy camera. And like you can shoot next to someone about, people think it's a toy camera, so they don't think you're a photographer at all when you've got this as hand. And I'm sure there's small digital cameras that you can get, like the Ricoh, whatever else. But for me, yeah, it's that was one that does some great stuff on the street.
Thanks, mate.
You're right. I'll start to move a bit quicker through these, hopefully. Again, shooting for the colors and trying to keep a clean composition in the background, etc. This was probably 1:15. This was with the M6, and it was 400 speed film. And again, yeah, purely shooting for an interesting scene, but also the colors too. I've had some street photographers comment, I've read things that street photographers say you shouldn't take photos of people from behind because it's overdone and it's a boring shot. But for me, I'm not sure how useful it is for us to have rules imposed on us. So yeah, I do actually tend to shoot. I'm comfortable shooting in front. Not that I shoot people a lot anymore, but yeah, shooting from behind, you can also get some interesting compositions, of course. different thing, bit of shutter drag going on, which just created a very almost ghostly-like feeling for the woman in the picture for me. And again, this was out of necessity. I think I was, having to shoot down that low to get the exposure right. But again, very different feeling to the shot. This was shot on a 50mm lens on an SLR, an Olympus OM2. And I was watching the skateboarders. I was trying to get an interesting shot of a skateboarder. I was trying, and nothing was coming up. And then this skateboarder fell over outside the bowl, and his skateboard rolled down into the bowl. And I looked to the left, and I could see his shadow sort of piercing across the bowl and making this alien-like figure. So yeah, I was able to get one shot, and I stayed for a while and couldn't get anything near as interesting as this composition. Why I'm showing this is really things like I enjoy going out in non-typical conditions. People enjoy sunshine or bright light or whatever else. I love going out in rain or mist or fog, and to me it's just a lot more interesting. The scenes you can get are quite different to what you would get obviously in bright light, and just they tend to play a little bit more into how I'm seeing things than a bright light day. Having said that, this is a very bright shot. This was taken with that little 35 SE that I mentioned before. And yeah, just obviously her shadow in the background looks like she's got a nun's habit on or something like that. And the colours and their expression in her face was what caught me, and the clean backdrop, which made it work for me. I was doing some double exposures for a while, and in-camera double exposures. And I took the shot of the city in the background here first, up on a car park rooftop. And then I thought to myself, how am I going to get something interesting that goes with that? And I really had no concept in my head at all. And then I was walking down the street 10 minutes later, and I walked up behind this lady in the hat, and it just happened to pan out nicely, which was nice. Classic old people having a good chat up at, I think it was the end of Bondi. Typical street scene for me. Again, shooting behind, but for me there was something interesting going on with the way the lady's head was angled and her arm was angled. And I guess the only other thing I would say about this is I'm hyper conscious of having a camera near the beach, and I always keep it out. I don't try to sort of sneak around or do anything like that. I'm very conscious that you want to be obvious when you're at the beach and not sort of hiding anything you're doing with a camera. So that's just how I tend to shoot down there. Interesting shot at the Opera House steps, which just made me laugh. And I like the way the lady's dress on the left-hand side of frame is also mirrored in the way that it kinks up into the air there. This little pigeon was wandering up and down that shadow's beam, and when he got near the little sort of zebra crossing, I thought there was something going on there. This was shot, and again, people may be looking at my work going, it's not all street photography, but I guess it's just what I shoot and what I'm showing. This was shot on slide film at night, and as I shot the film, I think it was a 30-second exposure, this car drove through the frame, and I was really annoyed. I'm like, oh, that's ruined my shot. So I went and took another one, and this shot was far, far more interesting than the shot without the lights in it. So I decided this was the more interesting one to show people. I went to the USA, and I took the M6, and I took a panoramic camera, which I'll show you a few shots over the end. So I had 5 days in New York, which is incredible for those of you who haven't been there. That and Tokyo would be the two places I'd definitely recommend going to. This shot for me, I struggle with because it's not a clean background, and I'm very OCD about that, but I thought there was something going on with the Where's Wally type pose of the guy. These guys were having a real heated conversation, so I just figured how close can I get to keep them as the focus in the scene and be interesting. So that was a little bit of a challenge, but got there. Then I started looking at things like light, how it's falling, simplicity of the shapes, the colors, etc. I tend to, well, I don't. I just don't. I choose not to take pictures of photos of people that are homeless. But to me, it was clear that this girl wasn't homeless, and she was pretty well dressed up, and she'd been out for a night. It took me a little bit of time to figure that out as I was walking towards her, but it was a bit of an interesting scene and pretty typical of things that you could see on any given street corner in New York. It was just amazing places everywhere. I was very lucky that it was the solar eclipse during the time when I was there. So there was one afternoon when there was some quite comical sort of people getting about and things going on in the middle of town, like this sort of thing. So just quite a sensory overload, which was fun. Again here, just what I thought was interesting on a walk through the high road one day. This shot was also interesting. I had an image in my mind of someone looking out through the window. I'd been shooting all day on a train. I'd probably been walking around New York for like 7 or 8 hours, and I got off the train, and that shot, I was like, oh, there's an interesting shot there. I wonder if the next train that comes up has someone on it. 100%. This kid pulled up in front of me in the train. I was able to get down on one knee and fire off 2 shots. One of them was out of focus. This one, I think this one might have been the first shot. And then the train pulled away. But yeah, for me, there was definitely just the glasses and something in his expression that was more interesting than usual. I quite enjoy looking at silhouettes and the light and how it moves around. And moving into the train station, there was a big rush of wind coming out as the other trains pass in and out. So that's where this one was from. I enjoyed getting around different parts of town. So this was in Williamsburg, which is the Jewish part of town. There weren't many people there. I think it was the weekend morning. There was very few people out and about, but any people that were out and about would generally sort of spot you and cross the road to walk away from you or put their hands up in front of your face. But this guy was just sort of walking around past me as I was shooting. Just typical street scene, bit of an interest in the flag direction and the colour of the car and the fact that flag is blowing the wrong way for me. I thought that was something of interest. More typical New York City. Just literally happened right in front of me on a street corner, which was very lucky. I think there's 4 X-Pan shots here. So X-Pan's a panoramic film camera made by Hasselblad many moons ago. I bought it before I went there because I wanted to challenge myself and see how you could use it for street photography. I really found it very challenging to shoot because the frame is so wide and you have to have a consideration of the full width of the frame. And for me, being quite OCD about having clean backgrounds and all that sort of stuff, I like to have the clean, uncluttered frame. So I found it super challenging, but really fun to have in your bag as something very different to pull out if the situation warranted it. And as you can see with this shot here, I waited for the boy to get up a few minutes and for something interesting to happen before I took the shot, because to me, it needed something more than just the umbrellas. The shot here, again, lent itself well to the panoramic ratio. And I was sad to see that there's only, I think, 2 people in the whole shot that aren't on their phones, which I thought was just a classic indicator of our times these days. And San Francisco, it was pretty much the last time I shot the camera. I came home from Melbourne and I had it for 2 months all up, and I couldn't see myself shooting it anymore in Melbourne that I had overseas. So I actually got rid of it. So that was, I guess, my little foray into shooting panoramics and seeing how they would adapt to a street scene. So moving on to slowing down in my work a little bit more, and I guess looking at different sizes of frames like 6.7 and 6.6, and how I now approach my work versus how I used to. So I find that it really slows me down. I find that there's a different challenge in shooting a 6/7 frame from shooting a square frame from shooting a 35mm frame. And I really enjoy trying out different ways of shooting and seeing how I can adapt to it from another point of view in terms of a frame and something of interest. And I've also found that the more I do meditation, the more just the more flow I get when I'm out shooting. So maybe there's a link there, but yeah, it's definitely something that I've adopted and I enjoy doing and keeps me focused on when I'm out shooting. This shot was taken with a Rolleiflex, so square camera, you're looking down, there's a reverse left to right, so there's that challenge to work across. And the thing that's interesting for me is you've got it at waist levels, you know, a la Vivian Maier-esque type shooting. So is it obvious from the person's point of view that the camera's pointed at them or not? Or is it more obvious because it's such an old camera that people have never seen before? So it's fun to go out with and fun to shoot with. This couple were great. I was sort of in their space for maybe 5 minutes. Had no issue with me being there at all, and I was really just waiting for them to do something interesting before I took the image. So yeah. This was shot over a fence, and this is a 6/7 rangefinder camera, so it's a lot easier to shoot than a Rolleiflex, and obviously different frame format. I almost never ask for permission when I take a photo. I mean, like 99.9%, I don't ask for permission, but in this case, I actually did. Because the gentleman had seen me and it was a scene that I couldn't pass up and I just wanted to take the photo. So I asked him and he was 100% fine, which was nice. But yeah, a little bit of history in Australiana going on there. One thing I mentioned before is about shooting the same scene at different times of the day. So I guess here, looking at this versus the next photo, you'll see was the same area at night and just a different feel to it, but still obviously the same subject matter and the points of interest for me. And then just the colors going on at night and the lights and even that detail of the red window in the background were just things that I was really drawn to. And you'll see now moving forward, there's far, far fewer people, if any, in the rest of the shots. And it's something that I've consciously moved towards. I guess it was really seeing a lot of street photography out there and just wanting to do something a little bit different myself. And not that I can't go back and say, right, I want to do a different style, but it was just something that I consciously moved towards as I started shooting these slower cameras that had fewer shots in them, and yeah, was more slow to shoot and more critical in the framing from a precise point of view. Things like, I guess, leading lines and graphics and color in a scene, and these were the things that I started to be more drawn to. As I said before, I love going out and shooting in fog or rain or different weather. So I woke up one morning and I thought it was the heaviest fog I'd ever seen in Melbourne. I'm like, where would I go? And somehow I ended up in this shopping centre car park, and the rain had just been on the ground and there was the reflections going on. And yeah, just the fog was really beautiful for me. Yeah, some night photography in Sydney, and just, I guess, the interest of the lights on versus not in the front of the house, and the detail of the fence and the brick and the sign, etc. This was a local fairground amusement park that had just opened because it was just getting to twilight. I think they were opening up for the night. So yeah, I just wandered around, took some photos in there. Again, here colours, light, geometry, and just the night aspect and the feeling of the commonality of people's experience with the laundromat and those sort of things. Yeah, and I happened to find this little character-filled laundry bag within one of the laundromats one day, which just had a bit of personality going on, which was lucky. For me, again, yes, shooting from behind, shooting through a window frame to sort of frame things. I did wait to see if there was going to be anything interesting, because initially they were both looking straight on, and then the guy on the left turned his head, which just made a much more interesting frame than without. So Is this? I guess I would go back to my question before. Is it street photography? Does it actually matter? I guess I'm just shooting for an interesting scene in the light, and that the couple down at the front that are lit up right in front of the wave. And again, the light here was just there for a few minutes, and then it was either too bright or it was gone. So it was just happened to be right spot, right time. And then, yeah, I guess just showing examples of scenes that you find when you go out for a wander. I probably waited about 10 minutes for the wind to blow in the right direction here. Just patience and the fact that the wind blew it and made it curled rather than straight up for me was a lot more interesting looking at the two images. Some more night scenes here. And the other reason I go out to shoot, I guess, is documentation for myself and just out of interest's sake. This classic Australian old milk bar was actually refurbed about 3 or 4 months after this photo was taken. It's all brand new, black plastic, black paint outside it. For me, it lost all the character that would have been there in this scene. A little bit of a story behind this one. So these couples, I only found this out when someone commented on the photo on Instagram after I'd shared it, but these couples, and it was actually the granddaughter of one of the couples, they'd known each other since 5 years, they were 5 years old in Greece or Turkey, and the last time, they catch up every time around the world, but the last time they'd seen each other was about 17 years before this photo. So that was how long they hadn't seen each other, and they were just there chatting away. I managed to get my position and for them to be comfortable for me to be sitting opposite them for a while. I think I took 2 photos. They didn't see me taking either of them. And then, yeah, that was pretty much it. But something interesting was going on.
Hey, Mark, I've got a question for you here from Jane. She's asking, are you shooting the night scenes with a tripod or handheld?
The scenes that are obvious will have been all tripods. The only stuff that I think was handheld would have been the earlier Japanese photos.
Yep, cool. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, cool. I think we've got another sort of 5 minutes, then I'm happy to open up some questions. Again, interiors is something that I'm very drawn to. Is it traditional street photography? No, I don't think so. But again, these are the sort of things, and from a documentation point of view, and the colours and the shapes and the characters of the chairs are the sort of things that I'm quite interested in now. Same here again. This is an interior shot, and to me, it was more about the geometry and the shapes and the colours than anything else. So I'll quickly take you through a couple of other series. One was I shot in Italy, which was a combination of 35mm and medium format, and I'll show you the difference in the approach that I take when I'm shooting 35mm versus the slower medium format, just so you can sort of get a bit more feeling of that. Again, here, just typical street shots, people in there. I'm shooting reasonably quick. There's enough shots on the frame to take a few shots. You know, trying to get into the action, trying to be comfortable in people's space, that sort of thing. Yeah, this was really an interesting place. This was a traditional meat market down in the southern island of Sicily, and for me, mainland Italy was very different to Sicily. Sicily seemed to be as if it was in a time walk. It was a really incredible place to go down and experience. Old cars, old buildings everywhere. Typical scene again from Catania, which is the capital of Sicily. This guy, I had to take the photo. I saw him literally from 200 meters across the other side of the road. I had to cross the road multiple times to sort of get the shot that I wanted to get. I only had one chance to take this photo because as soon as I took the shot, he was very unhappy with me taking the shot, which I understand, and I you know sort of saying something to me in Italian, so I just sort of let it go and go. But for me, I had to. There was an opportunity there to take it, so I had to take it. Yeah, some more from Catania. Nothing special about this, but just a different angle, I guess. I very rarely shoot from anything other than street level. Yep. pretty typical street scene of interest, I guess. And I did, not something that I would often do, but I did follow these four for a little bit to try and get the shot that I wanted. Yeah, and the wind blew at the right moment to get the pink lady in the right spot. Here, yeah, just shooting, I guess, more for a feeling for the shot than anything interesting happening specifically. So that's probably more where I'm going more so with the shots that I'm taking more recently. And for me, I guess why I'm showing this is really cropping. I don't have any issues with cropping my shots at all. This was taken on 35mm, and I felt like trimming out the edges of the frame really sort of focused it on the color and the textures that I was actually taking the shot for. So these are the medium format shots. Again, a lot slower than what I was shooting in 35mm. More shooting for scenes than anything else. These guys were great. I was actually sitting opposite them for about 10 minutes, and they were just having a real good chat and deeply engrossed in what they were up to. And there's the scene around it for me was interesting with the car and the tree, etc. Yeah, just more scenes from Italy. This shot was interesting too. I genuinely have something for old cars, and I love the fact that it was isolated on its own, and also the colours and the shapes of the air ducts, just bringing your eye and the sign into the right spot for frame. Again, more scenes. I think we're down to the last 10 or so slides. For me, I'm also looking for things like humour or quirkiness in the shots, which was evident from how I was intending on shooting this photo. And despite the fact that it may look incredibly serene and peaceful, I actually had to kneel down in the middle of a busy roundabout on one knee in between series of traffic moving back and forth to get this. So I will sort of, if I think there's something interesting to take, I'll go to a little bit of effort to try and get the shot. This was interesting because I was shooting specifically for the geometry and the colors and the shapes and the textures on the surfaces, etc. And then this lady started walking down the stairs, and then she stopped, and I sort of waited, and then she stood there for about 30 seconds. I think she must have been looking at maybe a train sign or something up the top, or a TV screen. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll take the shot. So I took the shot, compared it to the one without her in it. And to me, this was far more interesting. And I think it's also partly because she's a bit of a faceless person and fits into the scene well. Yeah, just classic European and/or Italian scenes, and again a little bit of humour with, I guess, the vegetation taking back over. Tripod shot at night, obviously very cold, middle of winter, and it was the details in the tree and the way the light was hitting the scene that was more interesting for me than anything else. And the last shot from Italy, yeah, small frozen field. Just I had to stop to get the shot because it just looked so serene and peaceful. Last couple of shots here. So yeah, this is my most recent trip, which was to the USA. And I only shot medium format, and funnily enough, I've gravitated now towards squares pretty much. So yeah, just the last few shots I'll share. And I'm quite keen on, as you can see, documenting history or documenting scenes. And for me, this interest in this shot was the flat tires and the cracked earth and just the feeling of it, and the rusty chain, I guess, and the feeling of the child that was there but isn't there right now. Obviously here, shooting specifically for colours. The faded truck wash sign and the truck. The car behind the fence, so just parked in the middle of the desert in the middle of nowhere. And yeah, this is the final shot that I wanted to share. I guess for me, it was the mystery of where do those track tires go and the hole in the ground. And yeah, just that was what I was after. Final slide before we open up for questions, but I just wanted to say an overall thanks to AASPI, and thanks to each of you for listening, and to Adrian for reaching out, and to Russell for having me on board. I do have an exhibition of my work at the Ballarat Biennale. For those of you in Victoria and or Melbourne who can make it when we unlock, and if anyone can after that date, that'd be great. They're 12 large prints, and they're all from medium format scans. They're all about 1 metre by 1.2 metres. And yeah, if you want to look at any more of my work, you can see my website and my social media just there. So thanks, guys. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. I'm not sure what's happening with my microphone. Russ, I might have to get you to answer any questions because
yeah, no worries. So if anyone's got any questions, I've got a few for you, Mark. Those last few you showed that were obviously 6x6. What are you shooting with now?
6x6.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm shooting with a Rolleiflex, which is just here. One sec. So it's a 1965 3.5F.
Yep. Very cool. And so do you get people coming up to you and ask you on the street about the kit? Because I know that you're trying to keep a low profile when you're shooting street, and then if you're using that, and then people come up ask you about your camera. Yeah.
If I genuinely want to be not disturbed, I won't use the Rolleiflex. Yeah, that's a very good question. It definitely, people come across the street and talk to you about it, which I if I'm in the mood for it, I really enjoy it. But if I sort of don't want to be disturbed, I wouldn't take that camera out. I'll be shooting something else. But yeah, generally everyone always wants to talk, say their grandfather had one or XYZ. Yeah.
Okay, I've got a question here from Mike. He's really asking about the post-processing after scanning. So what is your workflow with that?
So my workflow is I send all my film off to the lab to get developed. They scan it on a Noritsu for my working scans, and then they Dropbox me the files and I pick up the negs. I look at them in an old redundant Apple program called Aperture, which I think they stopped supporting about 7 or 8 years ago, but I love using it. I don't enjoy using Photoshop, so I literally do brightness, a little bit of contrast, a little bit of that's it pretty much. I try and avoid doing any post-processing other than those, maybe crop or straighten. But yeah, I don't almost never touch the colors, and pretty much I try and keep it as close as possible on scan. And then if I'm going to print large, I will get the negative rescanned on a Hasselblad Imicon, which gives you sort of a 50, 60 meg file.
Wow, that's cool. I have another question here from Sally. She's saying that you use a lot of different cameras and film formats. So do you think that keeps you fresh in the way you view places, or does it help, or is it just the evolution process that you've had?
I think it was genuinely the evolution process. I think at the time I wanted to do things to shoot and try different things and methods of framing. But now that I've gone through a lot of different formats, I think, tried the X-Pan panoramic, tried the 35mm, etc. The two cameras that I grab whenever I'm going out 99% of the time now is the Square, the Rolleiflex, and the 6.7 Mamiya rangefinder.
6.7. Do you think you're using that because it's the same kind of aspect ratio? I know it's not exactly the same, but before you were using the rangefinder and like a 6.7, but now you've gone to the Square. Like, do you do that?
Now,
or you're shooting for Instagram, or what's the?
No. It's I'm shooting for printing really. I found I was initially when I started shooting film, I was shooting 35. It was obviously the same as a digital SLR, so it was same. So I was very comfortable with framing and whatnot. And initially, I had no interest in Square, and so I was just shooting 35mm. It was great. And then I got the Square just as I thought I'd try it out for something fun because I saw one come up on Facebook. I thought, I'll give it a go. Didn't really enjoy it all that much, and ended up got the 6.7. Shot that for a while, and then got really into shooting the Square. And now I'm probably preferring that over anything else. And it's really for printing. That's why I shoot those larger negatives, is so I can print 1 meter, 1.2 meters, etc. So it's about being able to get the resolution for big prints. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Susan's got a question for you, and she's asking, do you have any street photographers that inspire you, or artists in general?
Yeah, definitely. And the easiest way for me to answer that question is to look to my left at my bookshelf. So I enjoy the work of Eggleston. I enjoy the work of Gregory Crewdson. Funnily enough, obviously you can't consider him a street photographer, but his scenes and his eye is incredible. I've got Trent Park over there, obviously. I bought some books from Edward Hopper, who's a painter that I'm sure everyone would know, and Todd Hido's work I really appreciate. And yeah, Merovitz and etc. I do enjoy their work, but I don't happen to have any of their books. So yeah, they're probably the main photographers that I take inspiration from.
Oh, fantastic. Kylie's asked, she says, sorry if I missed it, but you only shooting with 120 film Kodak Portra 400 or other film stock for your 6x6 work?
I very, very, very occasionally throw a roll of black and white in there, but 99.9% it's color. Yeah, and it's Portra 400 is correct, yeah.
Mm. So black and white stuff, Tri-X, are you using that? Or?
I haven't shot a roll for a very long time, but I think the last one would have been, it's either T-Max or Tri-X, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Mike just said, thanks for the good show. 4x5 or 8x10 a la Alex Soth. So I think your next move is obviously going to the large format, according to Mike.
That's too much hard work. I'm very happy with medium format. It can print as big as I need it to. It would definitely be fun, but in terms of just pain, I think it's a whole nother level, yeah.
Well, you're talking about pain. As soon as I saw your profile pic, I looked at it and I thought, that looks like a tintype. And then you said it was Brent Coghill's work, and I had the pleasure of seeing a presentation by him. He's talking about John Koffler and his tintype and his camp tintype and that. And yeah, you talk about pain, pouring your own wet plates, processing them in 20 minutes or whatever.
Yeah,
that takes it to a whole new level as well. But the result is absolutely fantastic. I was going to ask you how you did it because it looks so much like a wet type. Oh, sorry, a tintype. But there you go. It is.
No, he had me at his apartment, and he poured that negative and developed it right in front of us. So it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, in his cardboard box. It is. Very good. I was asking you, have you ever processed any of your own stuff, or do you outsource all that?
No, I get it all done at a lab. Yeah, I don't. We don't really have any. I know it's very easy to do, and I know it's just I prefer to focus on shooting and other things than developing. But yeah, I'm sure it would be fun to do. But no, I haven't.
And you did say that you're shooting a bit of reversal film there as well. Is that something you want to do more of, or is it? And what was the reason for moving over to slides?
It was really because I just wanted to try it out. I have shot a little bit in 120, and I do have some rolls in the freezer. But I find for consistency of look, I think I just prefer Portra, because if I plan on doing a book or an exhibition, I think it just, from a cohesive perspective, it's good to have consistency. So I just try and stick to the one thing. But I do occasionally now and then enjoy shooting some slide. It's incredible. I mean, it's so beautiful looking at them on a slide, on a light box and stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. And if there's no more questions coming through, but I have one last question, and it's about a specific photo which you haven't presented tonight, and that was your, I think it's called Gunslinger, the one that that I first saw at the Pro Vic gallery there.
Yes.
I had a question on that. That looks like it was shot on tripod, but there's a figure in that as well. So no, that was handheld, was it?
That was handheld. Yeah. There's a good story behind that actually. I thought I dragged it out when I was pulling in. Maybe I just missed it. Can you see?
Hopefully I didn't miss it then. Wasn't paying attention.
No, I don't think it was there. I think you're right. Where is it? Here it is in here. There he is. That's the one? You can see my screen. Yeah. So it's funny actually. I was in a city with a friend one day, and I was, and that's Pellegrini's in Melbourne, which is famous for those of you who aren't in Melbourne. It's just basically one of the most famous cafes in town. And just to the right of that picture, there's a very friendly homeless gentleman that sits there. And my friend started talking to him, And I thought to myself, oh, feels like there's an interesting shot here. The light looks very different to what I felt before. This was shot in midwinter, and it was probably my shutter speed. I didn't need a tripod at all. It was f8. It would have been around 250, 500, so no need for a tripod. And I very rarely actually use the tripod except for night, and in fact, only or some interior work. But I was framing this up, and I'm like, oh, so I need something interesting to happen here. This shot on its own is pretty boring. And then this guy came out, lit up his cigarette, took a few puffs, and then looked towards me. I thought, oh, when he looked towards me, it felt like there was a shot there. So, yeah, that's the sort of story. And then my friend, when I showed him the shot afterwards, he's like, oh, guess I was right there. But I was talking to the guy. I'm like, yeah, you should have been up taking some photos. But
it's a wonderful shot, and congratulations on that one. It's probably the best. I mean, that's shot a lot around that part, but it's the best Pellegrini's photo I think I've seen. So yeah, congrats.
Yeah, cheers.
That's a ripper. Okay, well, I think that just about wraps it up for the questions. So I'd just like to say, well, thanks again for the presentation. I mean, the quality of the presentation and your shots is just absolutely fantastic. So so thank you very much for your time tonight.
No worries. Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys, and thanks for reaching out. It's really enjoyable, and it was interesting for me to dig through some old photos from 4 or 5 years ago that I hadn't looked at for a very long time. So thanks everyone for listening in. Cheers.
I think there's a lesson there too. In lockdown, you can go through your archives and see what you can get as well. So if you can't go out and shoot, go back and revisit the old stuff. You never know what you'll find there.
That's true. Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
okay,
guys.
I've got a few other things to finish up on, and I guess even though we're in a lockdown, Sithong is still on show. So you can head over to the AASPI website and take a tour of the virtual exhibition and check out our YouTube channel for past episodes of the speaker series if you haven't already done so. You can subscribe to that. So that is that. The series will continue next month. We'll revert back to our usual second Tuesday of the month time slot, which is the Tuesday the 14th of September at 8, and our special guest will be the very talented Melbourne-based photographer Kim Boyd. So that is it. So thanks everyone for joining us tonight, and I hope we can get to see you out on the streets real soon. So stay safe and good night. Okay.